Well, it looks like one of the world's most reclusive states, that of North Korea, is taking a step in another direction. Its young leader is said to be set on a path of reform. Kim Jong-Un this week dismissed the North's long-standing military chief, who it's understood was opposed to the planned changes. South Korean media report that the sacked general might even have been killed after a gunfight broke out when an attempt was made to arrest him. Let's get details on this and talk to journalist and independent writer Nile Bowie. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme today. So, two words there. Well, I suppose a bit more. North Korea, reform, that don't exactly always go together and hand in hand. When it comes to possibly reforming the country, how far along do you think Kim Jong-Un is prepared to go?
Well, I think the fact that the North Korean regime has even addressed the need for reform is a huge step in the right direction. I think at this stage, Kim Jong-un is looking to win hearts and minds, and he's been undoubtedly very successful doing that so far. Now, stylistically, he's changed the leadership policy of North Korea. He's given 2 public speeches, something that his father has never done. And on North Korean state television, we're now seeing female performers wearing things like tank tops and mini skirts. And it may sound kind of insignificant, but in North Korea, that is a sign of times changing. Now, in that recent speech that Kim Jong-un made, he spoke of North Koreans bringing about a time where North Koreans would no longer have to tighten their belts. Also, we have instructions before Kim Jong-il was supposed to passed away. He gave instructions to Kim Jong-un basically to do as much business with China and Russia as possible. And we see just before Kim Jong-il passed away, he was on his trip to meet Medvedev in eastern Russia.
All right, as we understand, I think, Niall, it's fair to say, okay, understandably, that his father would say, all right, do as much business as you can with Russia and China. But let's talk more about these reforms here, because, it certainly is unusual to hear, this kind of action taking place in North Korea. Here's Kim Jong-un talking about reform. You mentioned a moment ago some girls being seen wearing miniskirts and tank tops. Certainly, perhaps even the international community could look at this and go, well, you know what? Now is a time of transition and change in North Korea. Could it continue to transform? And frankly, if it does, how would the international community perhaps change its position when looking at North Korea?
Well, I think it's still really premature to sort of make those insinuations that the international community would change its view towards North Korea. I think it's really the application of those reforms, rather. What I'm trying to say is that 60 years of sanctions on North Korea has not worked. And I think things like the Chinese opening up special economic zones in the north of the country. We have 2 islands that are supposedly being developed into North Korean Hong Kong. We have the Razan special economic zone in the northern part of the country. And we have the Kaesong special industrial complex, which is South Korean owned. And the North Koreans basically produce products in there. So I think all these things are a step in the right direction, but as long as the U.S. and the ROK are illegally firing during these military drills into North Korea's territorial waters, that's against international law, you're going to get belligerence from North Korea.
Well, certainly we did have some cross-border clashes in the past year or so during so-called military drills. But of course, it doesn't take much to go back to the days of old George W. Bush when he first came into power, and of course, talking about his whole axis of evil, and North Korea was one of the names he threw out there. Not a good way to start any presidency, frankly. But the military there in North Korea, it's one of the most powerful in the world. An estimated 1.1 million troops, rated as the 4th biggest army in the world. Is there a chance, do you think, the military could even rise up and try to block any types of reform, a time of transition, that is, with Kim Jong-un?
I think that's extremely unlikely at this point, mainly because the political arm of the regime and the military are one and the same. So you're not going to get an uprising from members of the military, even if you have people like Vice Marshal Ri Yong-ho, who was apparently deposed. But, the man is 69 years old, so it's possible that he was actually ill, and this story is correct. But what you had mentioned earlier was the fact that there was supposedly some gunfight. This was in the Chosun Ilbo, which is the South Korean newspaper, and personally, I find this account very unlikely. It's reportedly unverified. and many other news outlets such as Reuters have completely omitted.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, because you do raise a really good point there. And the fact is that there's the South Korean media outlet, the South Korean newspaper is talking about this deposed North Korean military chief who might have been injured or even killed in a gunfight after he was told he would be sacked. South Korean newspapers, or many networks or outlets, could say anything they want about North Korea, because how are you going to verify it? It's going to be next to impossible to confirm what's coming out of there. Very briefly, Niall, I'm running out of time here, but I must ask you, when it comes to reforms that Kim Jong-Un is trying to implement, or at least trying to voice here, do you think the reforms could impact relations between both Koreas?
Well, I think the international community at this point really needs to emphasize and to encourage direct talks between the North and the South. I mean, that is really what we need to see happen. And until that happens, there is no prospect for peaceful reunification.
All right, Nile Bowie, independent writer and journalist, joining us live here on RT. Thanks. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.